I didn't grow up dreaming about owning a gas station. I grew up watching my father work himself into the ground so we wouldn't have to. He was the kind of man who paid bills early, kept receipts in neat stacks, and treated every promise like a contract. Not warm, not cold, just steady. The type of steady you don't appreciate until it's gone. When he died, the funeral was quiet, in the way real grief is quiet. No dramatic speeches, no fighting, just people standing too close to each other, not knowing what to do with their hands. The fighting waited for the next week. It happened in a polished conference room at a law firm downtown. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and stale coffee. My brother Mark wore a suit that still had the tag crease in the sleeves. My sister Dana kept tapping her nails on the table like she was counting down to something. I was the only one who didn't dress up, not out of disrespect, just because I'd been up all night. Funeral logistics, calls, paperwork. My wife kept asking if I wanted her to come with me, and I kept saying no. This wasn't going to be emotional. It was going to be procedural. That was my first mistake. The attorney, Mr. Klein, sat at the head of the table with a manila folder in front of him. His voice was gentle in the way lawyers learn to be when money is about to change hands. Your father's estate is straightforward, he said. There are no contested beneficiaries. No outstanding liens that impact distribution. The assets are split per the attached schedule. Mark leaned forward like a kid waiting for his birthday present. Dana stopped tapping. I sat back and told myself not to expect anything. I'd done fine on my own. I had a stable job in operations for a logistics company. Decent savings. A quiet life. I wasn't here to win. Mr. Klein read the first two items. The primary residence goes to Mark. Mark's mouth curved like he'd been trying not to smile for days and finally got permission. The brokerage account, including the municipal bonds, goes to Dana. Dana exhaled, slow like she'd been holding her breath since the funeral. Then Mr. Klein looked at me. And the commercial property at 214 Route 9, the service station known as Ralston Fuel and Mart, goes to Ethan. The room went still for a half-second. Then Mark laughed. Not a chuckle. A real laugh. The kind that makes you look around for other people to share it with. A gas station, he said like he'd misheard. You got a gas station? Dinah's lips pressed together and she gave me that look. Half pity, half relief. Like she was glad it wasn't her. I stared at Mr. Klein, waiting for the "and also" that never came. Mark leaned back in his chair. That place is a dump, he said. Dad used to complain about it all the time. Dana finally spoke. Is there debt attached to it? Mr. Klein's tone stayed neutral. It is transferred as is. The station is currently leased to an operator under an existing agreement. The lease and all associated rights transfer with the property. Mark snorted. So basically, he inherited someone else's problems? I felt heat creep up my neck. Not because I cared what they thought, but because it was too clean, too deliberate. My father wasn't sentimental. He didn't do pity gifts. If he gave me something that looked like a joke, it wasn't a joke. Mr. Klein slid papers across the table. Deeds, a lease summary, a thin stapled packet labeled Addendum A, attached exhibits. Mark barely looked at them. Dinah scanned hers fast, like she was checking the numbers. I picked up mine. And right there, tucked between the lease summary and the deed transfer, was something that didn't belong. A single-page letter, not typed, handwritten. My father's handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, slanted like he was always in a hurry. It began with 4 words that made my stomach tighten. Ethan, read this alone. Mark was still talking. I'm just saying, if you don't want it, I can take it off your hands. I'll be generous. $5,000. Dana smirked. Mark? I didn't answer. I folded the letter and slid it into my jacket pocket like it was fragile. Mr. Klein watched me, just for a second, and I caught something in his eyes I didn't like. Not sympathy. Something closer to expectation. As we stood up, Mark clapped me on the shoulder. Hey, he said, like he was doing me a favor. At least you got something. Dad probably thought you'd like, you know, being a working-class hero. Dana picked up her purse. If you need help selling it, she said, I know a guy who handles distressed commercial properties. Distressed, that word stuck. I walked out of the law office without arguing, without defending myself, without telling them the truth, because I didn't know the truth yet. Outside, the winter air hit my face and cleared my head. My phone buzzed. A text from my wife. How did it go? I stared at it, then typed back, I think my dad just left me a trap. That night, I drove to Route 9. The station looked exactly like Mark described. Faded sign, old paint, 2 bays with doors that hadn't been opened in a while, a small convenience store with fluorescent lights that made everything look tired. The place sat on the corner of a busy intersection, but it still felt abandoned. The operator, a man named Sal, wasn't there. According to the lease packet, he closed at 8 p.m. I parked, unlocked the front door with the key the attorney had given me, and stepped inside. It smelled like oil, old candy, and stale air. I walked behind the counter and found the small office door. Another key. Inside, there was a metal filing cabinet and a desk with a cheap lamp. No cash, no safe, no obvious secrets. Just paper. I sat down, pulled the letter from my pocket, and unfolded it. My father's words stared back at me like a warning, and the first paragraph explained why he didn't leave the station to Mark, or Dana, or anyone who liked to laugh too quickly, because the worthless gas station wasn't the inheritance. It was the door, and someone serious, had been trying to get inside for a long time. I took a breath and kept reading, but halfway through the page, I froze, because my father had written one sentence that made the entire room from earlier replay in my head in a different way. If they're laughing, it means the right people don't know yet. And that's when I realized something that made my hands go cold on the paper. This wasn't about family. This was about an $80,000 asset hidden in plain sight. And I had just become the only person standing between it and the people who thought they could take it. I didn't know it yet, but the next phone call I received would prove my father was right. I read my father's letter twice before the meaning actually landed. Not because it was complicated, because it was measured. Like he knew exactly how fast my brain would try to run ahead of the facts. He wrote that the gas station wasn't worthless. It was positioned, a corner parcel on a commuter corridor, one of the few lots with the right frontage, the right traffic count, and, most importantly, the right set of recorded easements behind it. Then came the line that made my jaw tighten. They've been trying to buy this for years. They weren't buying gasoline. He didn't name my brother or sister. He didn't have to. He just wrote, if anyone offers you quick money, they're not being generous. They're being late. I sat in that tiny office with the paper shaking slightly in my hands, listening to the hum of the old fridge out in the store. Everything smelled like oil and dust. I should have felt lucky. Instead, I felt angry. Because Mark and Dana weren't just laughing at me in that law office. They were celebrating that I got stuck with the problem. And my father, he let them. He let them believe it. The letter told me why. There was an addendum filed with the deed years ago, something my father quietly negotiated and attached to the property records, a conditional purchase option tied to a larger land assembly project. The numbers weren't written in the letter, but he referenced them like a man trying not to scare his own son. Life-changing, he wrote, enough to bring lawyers and pressure. He told me to do 3 things in order: don't sell the property, not even a piece. Don't argue with family. Call Mr. Klein and ask for Exhibit D. I stared at that line for a full minute, because I'd seen the stapled packet, Addendum A, attached exhibits. And in that moment, I understood something that made my stomach turn. Mark and Dana didn't miss the truth by accident. They didn't look. They saw what they wanted to see: a dump, a joke, a consolation prize. And now I was holding the only thing they couldn't stand, something valuable they hadn't controlled first. I folded the letter and put it back in my pocket. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. I didn't. I answered quietly. Hello? A man's voice. Pleasant. Practiced. The kind of voice that smiles while it speaks. Ethan Ralston? Yes. My name is Grant. I work with a group that acquires distressed commercial properties. I heard you recently came into ownership of a service station on Route 9. I didn't like the word distressed the second time I heard it in the same day. How did you hear that? I asked. A short pause, then smooth again. Public filings, condolences about your father. Look, this may be a lot to manage. We can make it easy. Cash offer, quick close. My fingers tightened around the phone. I kept my voice calm. How much? 50,000. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was insulting enough to confirm everything my father wrote. That's not a serious number, I said. Grant chuckled softly, like I was the one being unreasonable. It's a gas station, Ethan. The tanks alone are a liability. Environmental issues. Insurance. You don't want that headache. Behind me, in the silent office, the filing cabinet sat half open like a mouth. I looked at it, then back at nothing. And I understood why my father wrote, "Don't argue with family." Because the real fight wasn't going to start with them. I'm not selling, I said. Another pause. This time longer. Then Grant's voice cooled by 2 degrees. Of course. Take a day. Grief does that to people. I'll call again tomorrow. The line went dead. And then silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I drove home around 2 a.m., sat at my kitchen table, and pulled up the county GIS map like my father used to do when he was comparing property lines. Parcel outlines, easements, recorded documents. Everything a normal person never looks at until they're forced to. The station was highlighted in blue, and behind it, thin lines I hadn't noticed in person, 2 easements running toward a service road and a utility corridor. One was labeled Access, Ingress, Egress. The other was labeled Utility, Row. Right-of-way. That's when the irritation turned into something sharper. Because right-of-way isn't sexy. It's paperwork. It's engineers and infrastructure. It's also how real money moves. I clicked the document history. A list of filings came up. Deeds, liens, releases. Then I saw it. A filing from 3 years ago. Memorandum of Option Agreement. My throat tightened. I clicked. The preview wouldn't open without a request, but the index details showed names. One of them a company I didn't recognize. Northbridge Development, LLC. I wrote the name down. At 8:12 a.m., I called Mr. Klein. His assistant answered. I told her I needed him urgently and used the phrase from the letter, Exhibit D. There was a pause that felt immediate. Then she said, he can see you at 10. Bring your ID. No questions. No confusion. That alone told me my father had prepared him. At 9:03 a.m., my brother called. Mark never called me before 9 a.m. in his life. I answered. Morning, he said, too cheerful. So, about the station. I didn't speak. He filled the silence fast. Listen, I was thinking last night. It's kind of unfair you got stuck with that. Dad wouldn't want you dealing with toxic tanks and inspections and all that. Is that concern? I said. Or are you about to repeat your offer? He laughed like we were buddies again. Okay. Here's what I can do. I'll take it off your hands. I'll give you 75. You said 5 yesterday. Yesterday was, emotions. I'm being fair. I stared at my coffee like it had answers. Mark, I said quietly, how did you know I was getting calls about it? Silence. A small one, but real. Then he scoffed. It's a gas station, Ethan. Everyone knows it's a mess. People talk. Who? Why are you being weird? He snapped, and the fake warmth cracked. You want to run a dump? Fine. But don't come crying when it bankrupts you. I let him talk. I let him run out of breath. Then I said, I'm not selling. His voice sharpened. You don't even know what you have. That line hit me like a confession. I think I do, I said. And I think you do too. He hung up. 10 minutes later, Dana texted, I heard you're planning to keep it. Please don't be stubborn. We can help you exit cleanly. Help you exit? I didn't reply. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in Mr. Klein's office again, and he was no longer using the gentle voice from the will reading. He slid a document across the desk. This, he said, tapping the header, is Exhibit D. It was a full copy of the agreement referenced in the memorandum. Option terms, confidentiality clauses, conditions tied to zoning and access approvals. And then I saw the number, not hinted, not implied, written plainly, professionally, like it had been negotiated by people who didn't laugh in conference rooms. $80,000. My heart didn't race. It dropped, like my body realized before my mind did that the world had changed. Klein looked at me carefully. Your father didn't want your siblings anywhere near this, he said. He anticipated they'd try to pressure you into a quick sale before you understood what the option really meant. I swallowed hard. How close is this to happening? He didn't answer right away. He just leaned forward slightly and lowered his voice. Close enough that you're already being contacted, he said, and close enough that if anyone gets you to sign the wrong document, even a simple purchase agreement, they can destroy your leverage. That's when the injustice fully landed. My brother and sister weren't worried about me. They were trying to get me to hand them the only ticket my father left behind. And I finally understood why my father staged it like humiliation. If Mark and Dana had known the truth in that room, they would have attacked it immediately. Lawyers, delays, contests, chaos. But because they laughed, they exposed themselves. Klein handed me a second sheet, a timeline, a list of names, and right at the top was one I recognized from last night. Grant Holloway, acquisitions intermediary, Klein said. He's not the buyer. I stared at the paper. So who is? Klein exhaled, and then he told me the part my father didn't put in the letter, the part that made my skin go cold. The real buyer, he said, has been waiting for one mistake, and if they can't buy it from you, they may try to make you sell it anyway. I didn't know it yet, but by the next morning, I'd learned what make you actually looked like. The next morning, I woke up with that document number still burned into my brain. $80,000. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like standing on railroad tracks, hearing something coming, and realizing you don't even know which direction to look. Klein had told me two things before I left his office. First, do not sign anything. Not a simple offer. Not a letter of intent. Not a temporary access agreement. Nothing. Second, assume everything will be framed as help. Family help, legal help, business help. We're just trying to protect you. He said, if they can't buy it from you, they'll try to create a problem you'll want to escape from. That's how people get forced into bad deals. I drove straight to the station, not because I had a plan, because sitting still felt like letting someone else write the next chapter. It was late morning, cold. The intersection was busy, cars flowing past like the place didn't matter at all. I parked near the pumps and stared at the building for a full minute before getting out. I'd inherited a dump, according to Mark, but the reality was more ordinary than dramatic. The fluorescent lights were harsh. The shelves were half-stocked. The coffee machine looked like it had survived 3 wars. The place needed work, sure, but it wasn't falling apart. A bell jingled when I walked in. A man behind the counter looked up, mid-50s, tired eyes, sweatshirt under a jacket, the kind of posture you get from standing in one spot for years. You Ethan? He asked. Yeah. You Sal? He nodded once, guarded. Didn't think they'd hand the keys to the kid. I didn't correct him. I wasn't a kid, but I knew what he meant. I was the owner, on paper. That didn't mean anyone respected me. I'm not here to disrupt your business, I said. I just need to understand what's going on. He studied my face like he was measuring whether I was a problem or a temporary inconvenience. People are calling, he said finally, asking questions, saying they're with the new owner. My stomach tightened. Who? Sal shrugged, but his jaw shifted like he didn't want to say. Couple guys. One sounded like a lawyer. Another was smooth, like sales. Grant? I didn't react, I just asked, did anyone show up? Sal hesitated a half-second too long. Then he said, not inside. That answer was carefully constructed. I kept my voice even. Sal, my attorney, told me something important. If anyone comes here asking for access, documents, keys, anything, tell me first. I'm not trying to make your life harder. I'm trying to keep both of us out of trouble. He looked away, annoyed. Man, I just pump gas and sell cigarettes, he said. I don't need drama. Neither did I, but drama doesn't ask for consent. I went into the back office. The door opened and my blood went cold. The filing cabinet was open. Not slightly ajar. Open like someone had searched it in a hurry. Folders were shifted. A stack of papers was crooked, like it had been flipped through too fast. The desk drawer I'd left shut was pulled out an inch. I stood there and didn't move. My brain tried to be calm and clinical. Did I leave it like this? No. I remembered the exact way it looked last night, because I'd been nervous enough to notice stupid details. Someone had been in here. I stepped back out and looked at the lock on the office door. It wasn't damaged. That meant one thing. They didn't break in. They had a key. Or they had access when the store was open. I walked to the counter. Sal, I said quietly, who else has keys to the office? His eyes narrowed. Why? Because someone went through that cabinet. He stared at me for a second, then glanced toward the door like he was suddenly aware of the outside world. I got keys, he said. My cousin has keys. He helps sometimes. That's it. Did you give anyone access? I asked. He didn't answer right away. That was the moment I felt something inside me shift. Not anger, something more disappointing. Because I'd been hoping this would be business, that I could handle it with contracts and calls and paperwork. But this wasn't business yet. This was pressure. And pressure makes normal people do dumb things. I leaned in just slightly, not threatening, not aggressive. Just close enough to make it clear I wasn't leaving this alone. Sal, I said, if someone offered you money, I'm not here to blame you. I'm here to stop it from getting worse. Tell me the truth, and we can protect you. His face tightened. Then he exhaled through his nose like he'd been holding it for hours. Guy came by yesterday, he said. After close? My pulse ticked up. After close? He nodded. Said you were family. Said you were sorting paperwork. He had a suit, nice watch. He said he just needed to confirm tank documentation for insurance. Did you let him in? I asked. Sal looked down, ashamed in a quiet way. He offered me 10 grand. I didn't flinch. I didn't show shock. If I did, he'd shut down again. What name did he use? I asked. Sal swallowed. Mark. My chest tightened like a belt had been pulled. My brother hadn't just called me. He'd come here. He'd used my father's death like a key. I stared at Sal and forced my voice to stay calm. Did Mark come alone? I asked. Sal shook his head. No. Another guy waited in the car. I didn't see him good. But when Mark walked out, he was on the phone, smiling. Like it was done. Like it was done? I turned away before Sal could see what that did to me. Because the break wasn't the cabinet. The break was realizing my brother wasn't just greedy. He was willing to move first and apologize later, if he apologized at all. I went back into the office and checked the files again, slower. Most of it was ordinary. Lease copies, vendor invoices, old maintenance logs. A folder labeled UST with tank inspections and compliance paperwork. Then I noticed what was missing. A red folder. I remembered it because it looked out of place in a cabinet full of beige. It was gone. I stepped out again. Sal, I said, did Mark take anything? Sal hesitated. He'd grabbed a folder, said it was insurance stuff. I nodded slowly like I expected it. Inside, my mind was doing something else. If Mark had the option paperwork or anything tied to those easements, he could try to create a competing story. He could try to sell it. He could try to muddy the waters. And muddying the waters was exactly how you force someone into settling. I pulled my phone out and called Klein immediately. He answered on the second ring. Ethan? Someone got into the office, I said. They took a red folder. Sal says Mark came here after close and used his name to get access. Klein was quiet for a beat, not surprised, just calculating. Did Sal admit it to you directly? He asked. Yes. Get it in writing, Klein said, and file a police report. Not because we think the police will solve it, because we need a timestamp and a record of interference. I looked at Sal again, then lowered my voice. And Mark offered Sal money, I said. Klein's voice hardened. That helps. That's not a family dispute anymore. That's attempted inducement and interference with a commercial lease. I stared at the station. Customers walking in, cars fueling up, the normal world continuing while my life turned into something sharp-edged. What do I do right now? I asked. Klein didn't hesitate. Change the locks, he said. Install cameras. Notify your insurer that you suspect unauthorized access. And Ethan, do not confront your brother alone. I hung up. Then I did something I didn't expect for myself. I looked at Sal and said, I'm not here to punish you, but we're going to fix this today. Sal blinked. How? I took out a notepad from the desk and slid it across the counter. You're going to write down exactly what happened, I said. Names, time, what he took, what he said. I'll call a locksmith, then we'll call the police. Sal stared at the paper like it was a trap. I kept my voice steady. If this gets bigger, they'll throw you under the bus first. This protects you too. That was true, and he knew it. He picked up the pen. While he wrote, I stepped outside and made 3 calls. A locksmith, a local security company for cameras, and the non-emergency police line. Then my phone buzzed again, a text from Mark. Stop making this weird. We're trying to help you. I stared at it for a long moment. Help. That word again? I didn't reply because in that second I realized something my father had probably understood years ago. This wasn't going to be won by being reasonable. It was going to be won by being prepared. And I was done pretending this was just an inheritance. By the time the police pulled into the lot, Sal had finished his statement. The locksmith was on the way, and I was standing under the faded sign of the worthless gas station watching traffic pass, feeling the first real clarity I'd felt since the funeral. They thought I'd panic. They thought I'd sell to make the problem go away. They thought I'd fold because it was easier than fighting my own family. They were wrong. And as the officer stepped out of his car and asked, Are you the owner? I heard a different kind of question forming behind it, one that meant the next phase was about to begin. What do you want to do about it? The chaos started on a Tuesday, which is how you know it was planned. Monday is when people talk. Tuesday is when they act like the decision just happened. I was at my desk at work when my phone lit up. Sal. I answered and immediately heard the strain in his voice. Ethan, you need to get here. What happened? I asked. They shut me down, he said. Fire inspector said there's an odor complaint and a possible tank issue. They put a notice on the door. My stomach tightened, but my head stayed oddly clear. Because there was only one reason someone would go nuclear this fast. They wanted me desperate. I'm on my way, I said. Don't argue with anyone. Don't sign anything. I called Klein the second I hung up. Odor complaint, shutdown notice, I said. This is them, right? Klein didn't ask who them was. Likely, he said. Do not touch the notice. Photograph everything. Ask the inspector for the case number. And Ethan, get an independent environmental consultant on site today. Not tomorrow. Today. I left work, drove straight to Route 9 and pulled into the lot behind a city vehicle. A uniformed inspector was standing near the pump island with a clipboard, talking to Sal like Sal was already guilty. The front door had a red and white notice taped to the glass. Temporary closure, pending investigation. I took my phone out and started documenting everything before anyone could tell me a story later. The inspector saw me and turned. You the owner? He asked. Yes, I said, calm, polite. What's the complaint? Strong petroleum odor reported, he said. Possible vapor release. We're following protocol. Case number? I asked. He gave it to me, slightly annoyed that I wasn't panicking. Then he added almost casually, You should know, these things can get expensive. Cleanup, testing, liability. I watched him for a moment. People who are doing their job don't sell the fear. They state facts and move on. This complaint, I said. Who filed it? He shrugged. Anonymous. It came through the city line. Of course it did. I didn't accuse him. I didn't argue. I just said, I'll cooperate fully. I'm also bringing in a licensed consultant to run vapor readings and verify the last inspection reports. That got his attention. Not anger, just the subtle shift of someone realizing this won't be easy. Sal pulled me aside while the inspector walked around the tanks. It was Mark, Sal whispered, not the inspector. Mark's been calling me nonstop since the police report. He said if I kept talking, I'd lose the lease. I felt the heat rise, but I kept my voice low. He can't terminate your lease, I said, and he can't threaten you into silence. If he contacts you again, you forward it to me. Every text, every voicemail, Sal swallowed. He said a developer's involved, that they're gonna take the whole block. I looked at the closed sign on the door, the inspector writing notes, the passing cars slowing down to stare, and I realized what my father meant by make you sell anyway. They couldn't buy the asset from me, so they were trying to turn the station into a problem I'd pay to escape. But that was just the beginning. By noon, my environmental consultant arrived, licensed, insured, and very unimpressed by theatrics. He ran readings around the fill ports, checked the vapor monitors, reviewed the last compliance paperwork, and then looked at me like I'd invited him to a fake emergency. I'm not seeing anything consistent with an active release, he said. If there's an odor, it's not coming from a failure event. More like someone spilled something and called it in. I stared at him. Can you put that in writing? He nodded. I'll write a preliminary report today. Full report takes lab time, but you'll have documentation that you acted immediately. That paper mattered more than my anger. Because if this became a legal fight, the winner wouldn't be the loudest person. It would be whoever moved like a professional. The inspector wasn't happy, but he couldn't ignore a consultant's report and recent compliance logs. He took my information, kept the station closed pending follow-up, and left. And the moment his vehicle turned the corner, my brother's SUV rolled into the lot like it owned the place. Mark got out wearing that same fake concern face he'd used on the phone. Dana stepped out on the passenger side, arms folded, eyes sharp. Then a third man emerged from the back seat. Nice coat, nice watch. Too comfortable in a dirty lot. Grant. He smiled at me like we were finally having a reasonable conversation. Ethan, he said, spreading his hands. Look, this is exactly what we were trying to save you from. Dana glanced at the closure notice and shook her head slowly. This is getting out of control, she said. You're not equipped for this. Mark stepped closer, voice low and urgent. I can still fix it, I told you. Sell it to me. I handle the mess. You walk away clean. I held my phone at my side, recording video. Not secretly, not illegally. Just plainly, anyone could see it. I pointed at the third man. You want to explain why he's here? Grant smiled again. I'm here to help facilitate a solution. A solution, I repeated. Or a purchase. Mark jumped in fast. It's business, Ethan. Stop making it personal. That line, stop making it personal, almost made me laugh. Because they were the ones trespassing, bribing, threatening tenants, and calling in shutdowns. Klein had told me not to confront my brother alone, so I didn't. I stepped back, raised my voice slightly, and said, You're not allowed on this property? Leave. Mark scoffed. You can't tell me where I can stand. I nodded like I expected that. Then I said, Officer? A police cruiser had pulled in behind them. Not a coincidence. I'd called non-emergency as soon as I saw Mark's SUV turn into the lot, because I'd learned something in the last week. Never rely on someone else showing up when it matters. Make it matter in writing, on record, with witnesses. The officer walked over, neutral expression, hand near his belt. Not aggressive, just ready. "You again," he said to me. "Yes," I replied. "I have an active report for unauthorized access and interference. These individuals are on the property after being told not to enter. The tenant has also been threatened." Mark's face tightened. "This is insane," he snapped. "We're family." The officer looked at him. "Sir, do you have permission to be here?" Mark started to speak, started to argue, then stopped when he realized the answer didn't exist. Dana's eyes moved to Grant. Grant's smile finally slipped. The officer didn't arrest anyone. Real life isn't cinematic, but he did something better for me. He documented the interaction, took names, and told them to leave. And when the officer asked if I wanted them trespassed formally, I said yes. Mark stared at me like I'd betrayed him. "You're really doing this?" he said, voice shaking with rage he was trying to control. "Over a gas station." I met his eyes. "You came here after close. You bribed my tenant. You stole files. You threatened him. And now you're standing next to a guy who called me with a lowball offer the day after the will was read." Grant tried to cut in. "That's not—" I held up a hand. "Save it. My attorney will speak to yours." Dana's voice went sharp. "You think you're the hero? You think Dad wanted you to ruin this family?" That was the moment it clicked, clean and brutal. They weren't scared of me losing money. They were scared of me keeping control. I watched them leave, Mark fuming, Dana stiff, Grant quiet, and I felt a small, dangerous calm settle in. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was forcing the game into daylight. That afternoon, Klein filed for an emergency order, restricting Mark from contacting the tenant or entering the property again, and he sent notice to Northbridge's council that any interference through intermediaries would be treated as a legal escalation. 2 hours later, Klein called me back. "They responded," he said. My pulse ticked up. "Northbridge?" "Yes," he said, and Ethan. They didn't sound surprised. I gripped the phone. "What did they say?" Klein paused, then answered carefully. "They said the option window is moving faster than your father predicted," he told me. "And they want a meeting. Tomorrow morning." I looked out at the station from my car. The closure notice still on the door. Traffic still flowing like nothing changed. And all I could think was, if the buyer was moving faster, then the people trying to steal it would move faster too, because I'd just shut the front door on them. So the next thing they'd try wouldn't be polite. I barely slept, not because I was scared of losing the money, because I finally understood what my father had been protecting me from. When people say it's just business, what they really mean is they want to do something to you and not feel guilty about it. By 8:30 a.m., I was back in Klein's office. This time it wasn't the soft, lemon-cleaner conference room where my siblings laughed. This was a smaller meeting room with the blinds half drawn and a speakerphone already set on the table like a warning. Klein had 2 files in front of him. One was labeled Northbridge Option. The other was labeled Interference Evidence. I sat down and he slid the second one toward me. "Before we talk numbers," he said, "I want you to understand something. Your father didn't just leave you an asset, he left you a position. And you've already done the most important thing, documented pressure." He tapped the folder. Inside were dates, names, officer notes, Sal's written statement, copies of Mark's text, and a printout of Grant's call log that matched the time window. Evidence doesn't feel satisfying in the moment. It feels petty. But in rooms where decisions are made, evidence is power. Klein dialed the number. A woman's voice came through the speaker. Calm, precise. "Good morning. This is Alicia Mercer, counsel for Northbridge Development." Klein introduced us. I said hello. My voice was steady, but my hands were cold. Alicia didn't waste time. "We want to exercise the option," she said. "Your father structured this intelligently. We have approvals moving through the city, faster than anticipated. We're prepared to close as soon as the conditions are satisfied. Klein asked the question I was afraid to ask. And the purchase price remains? Yes, Elisha said. 80 million, as set forth. I exhaled slowly and kept my face neutral. Then Klein asked the next question, the one that mattered more than the money now. Have you experienced interference related to this parcel? He asked. There was a pause. Not confusion. Recognition. Elisha said, We are aware there are third parties attempting to destabilize your client's ownership. We've seen it before. Klein glanced at me, then slid the evidence folder closer to the speakerphone. We have documentation, he said. Unauthorized access. Attempts to induce the tenant. A coordinated complaint resulting in temporary closure. Alicia's tone tightened slightly. Send it, she said. Today. Klein said, We will. But we also need assurance that your team will not communicate with any intermediary, direct or indirect outside counsel, and that any pressure tactics will be addressed. Alicia's voice sharpened. Understood, she said. For clarity, Northbridge has no relationship with that intermediary. If someone is representing otherwise, we will handle it. That word, handle, from a corporate attorney, isn't emotional. It's lethal. And then Alicia said something that finally gave me that quiet satisfaction my father promised. We ran an internal check, she said. An individual named Grant Holloway has been invoking our name. He is not authorized. If he contacted you, we would like his information. Klein looked at me. I had the number. I had the time. I had the recording of him standing on my property with my brother. I said calmly, I can provide it. Alicia replied, Please do. Klein ended the call and leaned back. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, Your siblings made a mistake. I didn't smile. I just asked, How bad? Klein opened the evidence file again and pointed to one line in Sal's statement, the part where Sal wrote that Mark offered him money and used his name to gain access after close. Bad enough, Klein said, that Northbridge's counsel will want to show they had nothing to do with it, which means they'll distance themselves publicly, and they'll likely cooperate if asked. I finally understood what peace looked like in real life, not forgiveness, not tears, a clean legal separation between me and their mess. That afternoon, Klein filed two things, a formal cease and desist to Grant, a petition for an expanded restraining order against Mark, no contact with Sal, no entry, no communication through third parties. Then we did the part that felt almost too simple for all the drama. We met Sal at the station, replaced the locks again, and installed cameras, front door, office, pump island, and the back alley. The inspector returned with my consultant's preliminary report in hand, and the closure shifted from panic to procedure. It wasn't immediate, but the tone changed. The fear tactics lost their teeth once there was documentation from a licensed professional. By evening, I went home, and for the first time since the funeral, my house felt quiet in a normal way. Then my phone buzzed, a long message from Dana. It started with, I don't know what Mark told you. It included, we were trying to protect the family, and it ended with, if you sign the station over, we can stop this before it gets uglier. I read it once. Then I forwarded it to Klein. No response. No argument. No emotional back and forth. Because I'd finally learned the rule my father lived by. Never negotiate with someone who benefits from your confusion. 2 days later, we had our court date. Mark showed up angry and overconfident, like the judge would pat his head and call it a family misunderstanding. He brought a lawyer, a cheap one, good suit, empty eyes. Klein walked in with a binder so thick it looked ridiculous. The judge didn't care about our feelings. He cared about patterns. He cared about proof. Sal testified briefly, just the facts. I didn't try to sound heroic. I sounded consistent. Klein presented the police report, the text, the timeline, and the video of Mark and Grant on the lot. Mark's lawyer tried to argue it was miscommunication. Then Klein asked Mark one question that snapped something in the room. Were you authorized to access the property after business hours and remove documents from the office? Mark's face tightened. He said, I'm his brother. Klein nodded politely. That's not the question, he said. Mark didn't answer. The judge issued the order. No contact, no entry, no interference. And when Mark exploded outside the courthouse, shouting that I stole the family from him, his own words sounded like what they were, a man grieving the loss of control. A week later, Northbridge's timeline accelerated exactly like Alicia warned. They secured the last city approval tied to that utility corridor, an access easement, boring paperwork that unlocked massive value. Klein called me the moment it happened. They're ready to proceed, he said. I drove to the station that night, not because I had to, because I wanted to stand in the place everyone laughed at. The sign was still faded. The pumps still looked old. The coffee machine still hated me, but the cameras were blinking. The locks were new. Sal nodded at me with something close to respect. I walked into the back office, opened the filing cabinet, and saw the replacement folder Klein had created, copies of everything Mark tried to steal. Then I pulled out my father's letter and reread the last lines. They weren't sentimental. They weren't poetic. They were practical, like him. If you keep your head, the money will come. If you lose your head, they'll take it. Don't confuse loud people with powerful people. 3 months later, the closing happened. It wasn't cinematic. No champagne, no fireworks. Just signatures, wire confirmations, and a quiet phone call from Klein. It's done. I sat in my car afterward, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the same traffic light outside the law office where Mark laughed. And I felt something I didn't expect. Not joy, relief. Because the story wasn't, I got rich. The story was, I didn't let grief make me stupid. A week after the closing, I did one thing that made the ending feel complete. I paid off Sal's small business loan, the one he'd mentioned once offhand when we were replacing the locks. Not as charity, as closure. Because he made a mistake, then he owned it. And in my father's world, that mattered. Mark tried to call me twice after the order expired. I never answered. Dana sent a final message. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply to that either, because happiness wasn't the point. The point was that they looked at a worthless gas station and saw trash. My father looked at it and saw leverage. And when they laughed in that conference room, they proved he was right to leave it to the one person who wouldn't sell it, just to stop the noise. That night, I drove past the lot one last time. The old sign was gone. The land was fenced off for development. And for the first time since my father died, I felt something like peace. Not because I won, because the questions were finally over.